just like animal farm. Justice mean inequity, so who go say the truth? Who go say the truth? Christian can say silence, Islamic leaders silence, kings and queens silence, traditional leaders silence. So who go say the truth? We are the workers of composite call. Now by area, why no better? We are the workers of composite call. One guy's out here, why no better? Who go say the truth? Who go say the truth? Oh, he need it to see what I see so. Now your friend on an iron come at them. Only papi obeka na sembia. So I want one bet you two. Everybody was afraid. And when Tinanan to my cottage again, once my boy dumping one and I. But who go tell the truth? Nanai or say me. Nanso bien person beka wasam because everybody is afraid. Anya safwe muayini. Aku drop on yina dalima. And who go say the truth? Obiaja konson so to grow your man sa to me bia ka kobrafo. Efo anyina ye. Efo wanyina ye. Na so kutrata down na so bidia ba ko why no keke. Afene fo be mani mo pia fo efo ne cross on my mo. Anya safwe mo ayini. Akuku drop on yina dalima. And who go say the truth? Abaya di bote chino. Yedi bi bebo nyande bi. Kachisa would your mouth pipinuma. Would your mind never shine my frafonsa? But who go tell the truth? TUC silence, even journalists silence. So then who go say the truth? Right is right, wrong is wrong, no matter how you justify. You say you wanna get rid of corruption. Someone want to help you. Now the person become your target. Jobless no they mean senseless. Poverty no they mean useless. One day them go resist.
Hello, good evening, and welcome to another edition of your weekly Monday evening socio-political talk show, which is MyView Show, here live on TodayGhanaNews TV, where every Monday evening we try to bring you the best socio-political talk show there is on air. where we delve into important matters that are happening in Ghana and Africa and in the world in general. And this evening is no different. This evening, as in every Monday evening, we are joining you to bring you another important topical matter discussion, this time as it relates or pertains to Ghana. And I say important because now just talking about it, it seems just like yesterday when at the turn of the year, I said that this year was going to be very heavy on politics. But just like with a blink of an eye, we are almost halfway into the year. And just in a few weeks, we are going to move into the last half of the year, which of course is the part where the elections in Ghana are going to take place. In lieu of this, the political parties have been on all available networks and platforms trying to propagate their message to all and sundry. And our network has also been part. We have hosted for some time various political parties to try and get them to espouse their message to Ghanaians, to inform Ghanaians on what they are going to do. So based on the information that they give, the Ghanaians can be able to make use of the information and cast their votes accordingly when the time comes. Last week, we hosted members of the New Patriotic Party, precisely the Russia branch. We hosted their chairman and their vice. And they tried to tell us some of the things and also explain to us some of the reasons why some of the things probably are not going the way as people would have expected them to be. But they gave hope that given the opportunity, they would do better, and they try to canvass for votes. Now, be that as it may, word on the street all over Ghana is that cost of living is rising astronomically, be it utility, food items, non-food items, and what have you. And to be able to understand this, we want to look at some of the issues that came up, particularly last week during our meeting or our discussion with the members of the New Patriotic Party. In our discussion, they tried to tell us that things were not as bad as people say they are, and that if even things are that bad, they could have been worse, and that given the opportunity, they can make things better. This evening, we are joined by a member of the NDC. Precisely, we are joined by Dr. Justice Salifu. Dr. Justice Salifu is the head of research of NDC Proforo USA. And he is going to help us take a look at the rising cost of living in Ghana to try to make us understand whether these what the causes are, what the impacts are, and whether we have really turned the corner as we have been made to believe or as we have been told. Dr. Salifu, good evening to you.
Good evening.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Good to see you again.
That's good to know. I'll come back to you shortly, but before I come back to you, I would like to say, extend a warm welcome to our viewers and listeners who have tuned in to join us. I would like to say a warm welcome to our listeners on Sakina Information Center in Northern Ghana and Tetali. Also, I would like to welcome our listeners who are joining us on High FM 3.7 in Achuhima in the Eastern region. And also, I would like to welcome all our listeners on the Kings FM in Accra, and also to our viewers and listeners who are joining us on all social media networks, on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, on Twitch, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and on any other network that you may be joining us from. We also say a warm welcome to our viewers in Jaframa TV, Fans TV, and also our listeners on Adelima Information Center. We say a warm welcome to you all. Now, back to Dr. Dr. Salifu. Dr. Salifu,
Yes.
we hosted you, I think, was it 2 months ago or about a month ago?
Yes, we did. Yes.
It's not very often that we host our guests in quick succession. But after our last show, the reviews from our listeners and comments were so positive. And in times past, there was a saying that if the music is good and the DJ is wise, he replays the music all over again. So, judging from the review that we got from our listeners, we thought, why not? We might as well just bring you back to help us understand issues as they relate to the rising cost of living in Ghana. And so we are very happy to have you, and we welcome you to today's show.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Now, Dr. Salifu, our topic for today is quite a tough one to deal with. I say tough one to deal with because this is a topic that impacts on the life of people directly on a daily basis. It's got to do directly with bread and butter issues. Now, as I said in the introduction of our show, last week when we hosted members of the New Patriotic Party, they explained to us that there were circumstances that have resulted in the rising cost of living as we have it now in Ghana, and that things could have been worse had they not put some pragmatic, solutions to try to mitigate the situation. Indeed, but even before they came, the finance minister and the president, addressing Ghanaians, told Ghanaians that the economy had turned the corner and that things were pointing in the right direction and that all the indicators were right and that things were getting better. Meanwhile, as I said in the introduction, that seemed not to be the message that Ghanaians seem to be given on the streets. The message Ghanaians are giving is that it seems cost of living is spiraling out of control. So, Dr. Salif, what is happening? What do you think is the cause of this seeming dichotomy in what the president and his ministers are saying and the members of MPP are saying and what the broader Ghanaian populace are saying?
Well, the president and his members of his government basically are trying to explain the problem away instead of fixing it. From the beginning, once they came into office, there were a lot of red signs already that the economy will be in trouble because expenditure was skyrocketing. They promised to pursue fiscal consolidation, but were running huge budget deficits, over 10% of the budget. So that pushed them to do a lot of borrowing. And when you borrow, it increases your expenditure. When you can't pay your bills, then it means that your economy is going to be grounded. That really pushed our debt to GDP ratio to over 92%, which is so bad, saying that we're only better than Sri Lanka. And because of that, it increased the cost for government, because what the finance minister tried to do was to retire old debt by contracting new ones to replace the old ones. In the course of it, the trick was that anytime they show us lower interest, they defended their action by saying that, look, we are paying low interest. But what they didn't tell Ghanaians was that before the retirement is done and the new bonds are sold, a lot of expenditure is incurred. So at the end of the day, it comes up to the same point. Now, Ghana tried to restructure externally, and it was a very difficult thing up to date. The government has not been successful in doing what it intended in terms of haircut. Because they did it domestically, they can't do it easily externally. The Paris Club is being so generous, trying to help them. Now, they are also faced with huge energy costs, because the cost of generating energy has always been going up because we don't pursue alternative sources of energy. Today, government owe the IPPs a lot. So the expenditure side of the budget has been, growing until IMF came to town. When IMF came in, what they wanted us to do was fiscal consolidation to reduce expenditure. Because when you reduce the expenditure side of the budget, then you can have control over it. The deficit goes down. Your expenditure is also going to be low. And government will also reduce domestic borrowing, because the more government borrow domestically, the more the cost of borrowing to the private sector goes up. And private sector sees any borrowing as input to produce goods and services. So it's actually going to translate into high inflation. Now, the thing is that once inflation is up to some point, technically it's not going to grow much, because people will drop out of the market. People who used to buy certain things will not continue to buy. So you may see the inflation coming down and you would think that is governmental action. And I think that has been the case. Someone who was consuming 6 tomatoes may decide to consume only 3. And in that case, it can slow inflation, but it's not going to eliminate it. Inflation is not just the rising prices that occur, but the kind of the rate at which it increases. So the rate will come down at some point, because food has inelastic demand. So consumers will always buy food, but the free market enterprise has created a situation where the sellers are very powerful. Because if you don't buy at the current prices, you can't get tomatoes anywhere. So at the end of it, what we can blame the government squarely for mismanaging the macroeconomic environment, because the macroeconomic environment has a direct causal relationship with the lifestyle of the poor, who consume more, because they don't save, they consume. And when you continue to make cost of production high, and then also a country that depends heavily on imports, the CD is weakening. And once the CD weakens, it also translates into high prices, because you need more of the foreign currency to import. So we can put it not past the government. They have been squarely responsible for this. And I think it is time for them to own up. It's not a bad idea to just say, look, we mess up in some areas and we're going to fix it. Politically, it's not prudent. But in reality, Ghanaians are, you need average Ghanaians' real income are virtually being decimated by the negative macroeconomic environment, which is very toxic to the industry and businesses.
Yes, I guess I see this your introductory comments, but it's touched on a lot of issues, and we will take our time to, strip it down so that we can examine them in much more detail. But before we do that, the explanations that's been given is that you say that we should put the blame squarely in the bosom of the government. But the explanation that the government has been given is that there have been some mitigating factors way beyond their control, and that most of these factors are global, and Ghana is not isolated from the global economy. And that in the era of globalization, things that happen in other places tend to impact on things that happen in all other places. So explanations such as the COVID-19 pandemic that happened a few years ago, and which they say affected supply chain all over the world, and also the Russia-Ukraine war, which also triggered another global economic crisis, seems to be the major factors that are bringing the Ghanaian economy on its knees, and consequently resulting in the rising cost of living in Ghana. What would be your assessment of these explanations?
You see, the explanation is just trying to mimic what has been said across the globe, that the pandemic had effect. But if you can build an economy that is not resilient enough to resist something that is going on in Ukraine, Ukraine's GDP has not been affected as, we are claiming that it's affecting us. It doesn't affect them in terms of inflation like we are. Because Ghana's inflation went up to 54%. 54% is huge, one of the highest in the world. And you see, there are a lot of factors that, contributed to the inflation. If you pin it to Ukraine and Russia, what it means is that supply chain disruption is what you'll be pinning it on. And supply chain disruption, it did happen, but it was very temporary. And other economies quickly recover. If Ukraine-Russia war were to be the major factor, why didn't it hit Togo and all our neighbors? If it hit them, why did it hit Ghana severely when we have more resources than them? See, whilst this was going on, the commodities that we sell wasn't very much affected. The price of gold and others did not get impacted that much. So revenues were coming in. It's just the expenditure. The reckless spending by the government caused a lot of mess. And because they are using Russia, Ukraine, the tomato seller can also jack up their price and tell you it's Russia, Ukraine. You see, so the Russia-Ukraine mantra translated to the buyer and seller negotiation, because the seller will always claim something is the reason why they're jacking up their prices. There's some level of price gouging in Ghana. You can't rule that out. But you see, it's reinforced by the government's attitude, giving this kinds of explanation. You continue to indirectly increase energy costs because you have a lot of taxes on energy. And that means it's going to keep going up. If you go to the north, for example, prices of food are pretty low. You come to the south, it's very, very high. And they claim it's transportation. So they're pinning it on energy, and that's very justified. But the government is basically doing nothing about it, because if they were to take the taxes from petroleum prices, it can reduce the cost of transport, and there will be no reason to continue to increase price of goods and services. And also, a country that import heavily, the import duties have not gone down. Production has actually gone down because they came out with a planting for food. They put in a lot of money, but we didn't get the yields that we needed. And the nature of Ghanaian economy is such that the informal sector dominates, and it's not as sophisticated as other countries. So we use the same textbook to apply situations that are very different from other countries. If you take, for example, to fight inflation, government was rather printing more money, as evidenced by what we found out the Bank of Ghana was doing. And when you do that, you escalate the situation. And also, our economy is very resistant to some policies. Because if you take, for example, interest rates, if you increase interest rates in Ghana, it will not make people to go and borrow. Ghanaian, if you give him 100% interest, they will borrow. It's just that they can't get access to loans. Unlike in the West, people depend on credit. So once they increase interest rate, people are very sensitive to what is going on with the credit market. So they will reduce their borrowing and reduce consumption. But in our case, it's not like that. Financial literacy is very, very low. Therefore, people don't even patronize. So once you change interest rate, it's not going to change anything. At the end of the day, the inflation stays the same. And then you look at food prices. IMF is in town. They are brandishing all these macroeconomic indicators, saying that they are getting out of the woods, but they are getting deeper into it. For me, go to the market and you see the effect it has on ordinary people. Real income is really diminishing. You see, the market forces doesn't know morality. They don't know poor, they don't know rich. So when you leave your country citizens in the hands of free market, the seller is going to bully the buyer because demand for food products are inelastic, no matter what the buyer wants it. So the sellers jack up the price. You see, the profit element is what no seller wants to touch. So whenever costs even go up, they will leave the profit and they will pass the increase to consumers. So the consumers keep getting hurt in many ways because price is not in their favor and the market is not in favor of them. government is not doing anything to regulate anything. Because if you look at the free market, why didn't we allow free market to determine wages? So the government has double standards all over the place. And sometimes the energy prices are controlled by the, government in some fashion, by taxes, by whatever. But price gouging, there are no price gouging laws in Ghana. Mm-hmm. In the West, they know the price mechanism is not perfect. So they have a lot of mitigating, programs. For example, there's poor policies. There are a lot of benefits that poor get. So when prices go up, the government of the US could decide to just increase welfare, and it's going to mitigate the suffering of the poor. And also, they can use interest rates, they can use other things, and they can even control prices. They have price gouging laws. And the price gouging law says that it says price ceiling. So you can't go beyond that. At the end of the day, there's some element of control. But in our country, we took the textbook from the West and applied it wrongly and say, look, everything should be determined by the free market. And sometimes the free market, like I said, doesn't know morality. They don't work in favor of the poor. They rather empower the sellers to exploit the poor, and government will justify it. And if you look at an average producer also, they are faced with a lot of challenges. The cost of energy, the cost of certain type of inputs. You import tractor, whatever implement you want to use to produce, the duty is very high. At the end of the day, you have to pass the cost to consumer. You look at all other factors of production, they've gone up, including labor costs. The price of mason service, you see, government doesn't determine that. It says minimum wage. But anybody providing, real estate services, they're going to suffer it because they are increasing prices in order to be able to also match up with what is going on in the market.
Yes. No, you need see talking about the policies taking textbook proposals or propositions from the West and implementing them in our country and expecting the same results. The government, in its defense, have tried to explain that they've not been sitting aloof, and that with the help of the IMF, they have tried to, arrest the situation as it was in Ghana probably a year or a year and a half ago. And you mentioned few of the things they've done. For instance, they say that there's been a successful implementation of the domestic debt exchange. They have implemented gold for oil to try to halt the the free fall of the currency. They have tried to and right now they are actually almost at a point where they are going to have the external part of the debt exchange done, debt renegotiated and everything. And what we are hearing is that maybe we are going to defer our payments to maybe somewhere, I think 2027 thereabout. And these, of course, the explanation is that it would give some breathing space to the economy and to the government, so that they can resume some of the spending that was suspended as a result of the debt situation in Ghana, and that as a result of some of these policies that have been instituted, the situation is going to get better as we move forward. Would you see that there are some specific policies that the government have done or have put in place or planning to put in place that is worsening or probably could worsen the situation in Ghana, or actually resolve the situation in Ghana moving forward?
The government is actually playing tricks with Ghanaians, because some Ghanaians don't understand how the economy works, and some of these macroeconomic factors, how they affect our economy. The stability of the CD is attributed to the inflow that comes in. And any money from the IMF, Ghanaians should know, it's not free money, it's a loan to Ghana to help with, to deal with our situation. in order to re-establish government's ability to service its debts. So basically, the advanced countries are trying to help their investors, because once Ghana's economy is stabilized, then they can begin to pay coupons to the bondholders. So this is a strategy the West is using. But anytime these inflows come in, it will hold the CD for some time. The CD will buy some time, but it can't stabilize it forever. Because what is causing the decline of the Ghanaian CD is the structure of our economy. We import heavily. And until we stop importing to that magnitude, the CD is going to always be an essential commodity in Ghana. So whenever they come in with these inflows, it will stabilize the CD for some time. But because it's not backed by anything, it's just an inflow coming in. The capacity of it to keep the CD strong is going to diminish. So at the end of the day, we'll come back to where we started. So at some point, the CD is going to continue to suffer. Because the structure of our economy is saying that everything we consume, we import. You look at the mining sector, it's controlled by expatriate companies. Foreign companies come into mine. So whatever they make, they expatriate in dollars. So that is also contributing to the weakening of the CD. And when are we going to ever stop that arrangement? We produce oil, but we don't process crude. So we have to import all that with our hard currency. So the structure of the economy is what drives it. MPP could have done a lot to create better stability. I mean, the short-term measures, for me, anybody can do it. Like who said any idiot can go to court? Any idiot can manage this economy by just getting inflow and then stabilizing the CD to some extent and then claim credit for it. But it will crumble, because when it comes in, we find other ways of getting it out and weakening our CD. And once the structure is in place that way, we are going to always suffer, all the negative macroeconomic figures, indicators that are coming to worsen the ability of the private sector to generate jobs and also be able to help government grow its revenues to deal with fiscal consolidation. When you look at our expenditure is one of the nemesis, because government spends a lot unnecessarily that they can control. We have all these land cruisers on the streets. We have them on our roads, and then they are fueled by government. The waste is so much, say that government cannot balance its books, but it has to keep borrowing domestically. They will have to borrow domestically in order to pay wages. And wages have not gone up. Why is inflation, we claim, is going down? Food prices are actually going up. I want to see the figures for food inflation, because it technically has been going very, very high. And at the end of the day, it weakens the ability of ordinary people to enjoy basic lifestyle. If you look at an average Ghanaian, they spend about 60% of their income on food. And we import heavily, because the structure is said that if you start poultry business right now, you can compete with importers from Brazil. You see, because Brazil has been in that business for a long time, so they enjoy some economy of scale. Produce very low, they have subsidies in their agriculture sector, we don't. So at the end of the day, you can't compete with the imports. And also, because of government attitude, this government, we all read about La Bianca issue, where they gave money to the MPP. They came to power and said, okay, you can continue to import, even if that affects our local poultry industry. So the government attitude are always paying most of these things too. They can make some sensible policy. They can come up with certain policies that can really, really control the cost of living in Ghana. And one of it is to reduce domestic borrowing, because the domestic borrowing is making cost of borrowing very high. So if you borrow to produce, you pass it on to the consumer. And price gouging laws doesn't exist in Ghana. So government doesn't care whether you increase price of tomatoes to 1 million each. It's your problem. It's you and the consumer. So at the end of the day, the market is not regulated. And the informal sector is very large in Ghana. No policy is in place to make sure that the informal sector is formalized. Because when you formalize your informal sector, then now you can have control over the economy. Certain policies we put in place, like I said before, controlling inflation with interest rates, it doesn't have the efficacy to do that because people don't go to town and say, okay, I'm going to start borrowing because interest rates have gone up. The nature of Ghanaian is say that give me any loan and they will take it. At the end of the day, it helps to destroy the macroeconomic environment and affect the private sector ability to help solve this problem. And until we go back to basics and begin to reduce expenditure, which is the message, we can go the unconventional way of investing in agriculture. If we invest in agriculture, control waste, try to improve the public transportation system. It's so sad when you in the morning you see people going to work and they are in queues to just take taxis and all that. We could have developed our transportation system, and that can reduce cost of living very significantly. Because the issue is that once government is not intervening in this direction and leaving the private sector, which is already out to exploit the poor, we will always have rising costs of living.
Okay, so let me ask you this last question for this segment of the show. Then we go for a break. When we come back from the break, what we are going to do is try to look at the impact of all of this on the lives of the average Ghanaian average Ghanaian in Ghana. But before we go on that break, you have talked a lot about price gouging. Economic, how do you call it, racketeering in the economy, and how that can also impact on the cost of living. As a matter of fact, there were about a year ago when when price of food items in particular was rising through the roof. The then Minister of Agriculture said that it was the middlemen who were the cause of the pricing situation in Ghana, and that Ghanaian traders or Ghanaians are so much into profit such that they would they were ripping off Ghanaians to their own benefit or the benefit of only a few people. What would you say is the extent? First of all, is this a genuine problem? If it is, what is the extent or what is the contribution of this problem to the overall problem of the rising cost of living that we have in Ghana?
Because you see, you blame it on price gouging, but who is supposed to make laws to regulate the market? Is the government. Like, the market forces, like said before, doesn't know the poor and the rich. They are not on the side of anybody. It is how you strengthen them, and the government is in the middle. So government can control some of these things and make sure that cost of production is low, number one. Because if you do that, then you can continue to control the economy, say that prices will not go up. The price of fertilizer, the price of imports, and then also allowing a lot of tax exemptions for companies that are important. When you do that, you are incentivizing imports. And when you incentivize import, local production cannot be, effective in dealing with some of this pricing issue. So government is the referee when it comes to the free market, economy. And when you allow the sellers to do that, then you come in and blame the sellers. What is the sense? Because government is supposed to put in mechanisms to control that. And also, if you look at the attitude of most state organizations, talk about Bank of Ghana printing a lot of currency into the system. Also, government making reckless expenditure because we import heavily.
Hello, Dr. Salifu.
And to invest. So investments are not being done towards getting solutions to some of these problems because, government has a very high deficit to deal with. And they need to deficit finance, which means they will have to go to the, local bondholders. To sell a lot of bonds in order to raise money domestically. to meet certain obligations like wages. So wages have not gone up. And when you do that, you are basically strangling the poor. And the poor, once they are in that state, is not good for the country because poverty rate will go up. And when poverty rate goes up and then people drop out of demand, aggregate demand for, it means that sellers cannot sell, unemployment is going to increase. And today, if you look at unemployment, it's a serious menace. Government is doing nothing about it, and people cannot get by. They can't get jobs. So at the end of the day, what are we doing to ourselves? Our educational system is also not preparing them to work outside the domain of this country. You see, you look at India. India invested substantially in their education, and most of their citizens have gone out. Ghanaians outside this country bring in over 5 billion every year, which is higher than what IMF will give us 3 years. So at the end of the day, if we don't prepare our citizens to go out and incentivize it, we will have to, deal with whatever the outcome of such behavior will be, because we can employ them, we can incentivize them to go outside the Ghanaian space to look for work. At the end of the day, they become a big problem. Government cannot invest heavily because also they have high debt servicing to deal with. They have other high costs of operating the government to deal with. At the end of the day, the government is out of current to deal with the current problem. We pray that when President Mahama comes in, he will begin to stabilize the economy, deal with the macroeconomic environment, and then be able to mitigate the suffering of the poor that we all see today.
Okay, Dr. Muhammad, we'll take a breather so that you can sip a glass of water. We'll take a break now. Then when we come back, we will try to look at how this situation is probably impacting on the lives of the average Ghanaian, and how and what we can do to mitigate this situation. That is after we come back from this break. So if you have just joined us, this is MyView Show here live on Today Ghana News TV, where this evening we are looking at the rising cost of living in Ghana. And our guest for today is Dr. Justice Salifu, who is helping us understand the matters, this particular topic, and to try to help us, at the end of the show, maybe try to help us see whether there are things that we can do that can reverse this situation. So we will take some comments from some of our viewers and listeners, and when we return, we would move to the second segment of the show. So while waiting for the comments from our viewers and listeners, we would like to say thank you to our listeners on Sakina Information Center in Tatali, Northern Ghana. We also like to say thank you to our listeners on High FM at 3.7 in Achuyima in this region. Also, we would like to say thank you to our listeners and our viewers on the King's FM in King's Radio in Accra, Ghana, and all those joining us on all social media platforms. Okay, so we have Fans TV. You say happy Eid to you, Albert, and your guest. You are watching from Aflao region. I didn't know Aflao was a region. Fans TV. Anyway, thank you very much for this, and happy Eid to you as well. Hope you are enjoying the show. I hope you are having a nice holiday in Ghana. Sekapa TV. You say greetings from Jumapo near Koforidua. Greetings to you too. You say you are watching on YouTube. Dr. Salifu has even become very expensive in Ghana. Did I get that right? Okay. Lady Mal _2, you say, I should please ask Doc, if NDC and John Mama wins power in December, is he sure prices of goods and services will come down, and what will do the magic? You are watching from St. Petersburg in Russia. Okay. When Doctor comes, we will try and pose that question to him. Silent listener. Wow. You see, kudos, Comrade Albert. Keep up the good work and more grease to your elbows. Thank you very much, silence listener. That's quite a powerful name. Thank you very much for doing the watching, and thank you for the comment. Our next comment is from Silent Listener. You say you are watching from Kokrobiti in Ghana. Thank you very much, Silent Listener, for doing the watching. Kwasi Nsia, you say, Doc, has the Russia and Ukraine war really affected food commodities in Ghana? I think it's answered that question. Thank you very much, Kwasi Nsia, for the comment. The next comment we have comes from let's see, where's the next comment is from Frempong Buffy. Frempong, you say, Doc, maybe Ukraine inflation is not affected because the USA and the European Union continue to pump money into Ukrainian economy, and you are watching from Akusi near Somenya. Well, we'll try and test the hypothesis of that when Dr. Salifu joins us. Jeffremo TV, you say, good evening from Raura in Oti region. Thanks for the collaboration. You are live on our platform in Raura. Thank you very much, Jeffremo TV, for always joining us and also for the broadcasting as well, sending the message to as many people as possible. Thank you and have a good evening to you and your listeners. Kweku Ivo, you say, I am already seated listening with rapt attention. Greetings from Suhum. Thank you very much, Kwaku, for always joining us every Monday evening. Asempa Hene Buachi, you see, what is going on in Ghana is very bad. To eat 2 square meals a day is very challenging, but they don't care about the suffering of the people. And you are watching and listening from Achim Himai in the Eastern region. Thank you very much, Kwaku Ivu, for your comment. Nyame your boy, you see, you are watching from Nkwanta in Oti region. The English is too heavy for you. Okay, sorry. We'll try and reduce it for you. But you are enjoying the education, and you are, of course, the popular tea seller in Nkwanta Lorry Station. Thank you very much, Nyame your boy, for always joining us and for your wonderful comment. Nothing from you see. Greetings from Tatali, Northern Ghana and Sakina Information Center listeners. Thank you very much, and greetings to you and the listeners of Sakina Information Center in Tatali in Northern Ghana. Robert Kimpe, you say you are watching from Paris, France. Doc is speaking the truth. Thank you very much, Robert, for doing the watching and for joining us all the way from France. Mavis Boateng, you say you are watching from Lisbon, Portugal with the whole family. Thank you very much, Mavis, for always doing the watching this and every Monday evening. So to thank you to all our listeners and viewers who have sent us comments on this rather important matter for discussion. And as I said at the beginning of the show, this is rather quite important because this has to do with the very essence of living, which is bread and butter issues. And as one of our our listeners viewer shared, that to get 2 square meals in Ghana these days is very expensive. And when Dr. rejoins us, he is going to tell us maybe some of the strategies that he has had, or what some of the things that he knows that in situations like this people adopt in order to cope with the situation. So, Dr. Justice Salifu, welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
Yes. So, yeah, before we went on the break, we said that, in the last half of the show, we will try and see how this situation of rising cost of living in Ghana is affecting the average Ghanaian. Ideally, we would have wanted to be hearing rather from the average Ghanaian because, they are the ones who are feeling it in their pockets. But since you are here, maybe we would also like to hear from you. Probably, what are some of the indicators, the coping strategies, mechanisms that you are hearing that people are adopting at this particular point, and what is it that probably you, in your experience, that you think or that you have read that people tend to adopt in situations like this in order to cope with the situation?
In fact, it's you need to go to the market to understand what an average Ghanaian is going through. Because prices are very high. And you look at, I deal with students and I can see their condition as actually the condition of living has actually deteriorated because you can't afford basic things. So at the end of the day, It's affecting their ability to learn, it's affecting an average Ghanaian ability to function. The average Ghanaian worker's income is useless today because of the macroeconomic environment, because real income continues to diminish. Anytime you have high inflation, it affects the poor, especially food inflation, because the poor predominantly spend their income on food. And if you can't control the food prices as a result of supply chain or your physical situation, you're going to download problems to the poor. And this is what they are going through today. So because of the nature of the economy, Ghanaians are now basically beggars. And I just wonder how someone who earns 1,500, if you take 1,500, it can buy you banco and tilapia 15 times. So it means average Ghanaian.
Okay, it seems we've had a brief interruption in the network of Dr. Salifu, but before we lost him, he's going to rejoin us to continue with our analysis and assessment of the situation. But before we lost him, he was trying to tell us the impact of the current state of rising cost of living in Ghana on the average Ghanaian, and he tried to, explain to us on how the average Ghanaian who earns probably like 1,500 or 2,000 Ghana cedis is going to survive with that income in Ghana in an economy where prices of fuel keeps rising by the day, prices of utility bills keeps rising very frequently, and all of these are having cascading effects on the prices of goods, the average goods that are sold in the country. For local production, cost of production have gone up, which of course is being passed to the Ghanaian who has to do the purchasing. And for imported goods, of course, the depreciation of the local currency vis-a-vis the US dollar and other foreign currencies is resulting in importation of inflation, which is that as the price of the dollar and other foreign currencies keeps rising against the local currency, people who import goods would need more Ghana cedis in order to buy these, and because of that, the price of their goods are going to increase eventually when they get them and they bring them to Ghana. And as Dr. said during the first half of the show, this is not being helped by the rising cost of tariffs in the ports. So put all of these things together, and it leads only to one direction, which is the rising cost of goods, be they local or foreign goods. And these inevitably are passed on to the local consumers who have to contend with these on the daily basis. And these are the things that are in the expert opinion of Dr. Mahama are the cost of rising cost of living, and these are having impacts on the lives of the average Ghanaian on the streets. And Doctor is back here with us. Before we lost Dr. Salifu, he was trying to tell us the impact of the rising cost of living on the average Ghanaian. So, Doctor, take it away.
Yes. So an average Ghanaian lifestyle has been altered by the macro government to stabilize the economy. That is why we elected them. Now, if they can't do that from the beginning, the signs were very clear that the MPP was going to drive our economy into the ditch. But they weren't listening. That's one of the biggest problems they have, because spending was nothing to them, and they spent so much. Now they can't get hold of the their fiscal situation. The fiscal space is very toxic now, and the government is shopping for ways to borrow every single day. We discovered lithium. they're not thinking of the long-term benefits that we can get from it. They are already trying to collateralize it in order to cash out in advance. They've done that with many of our mineral resources. Now you look at the major sources of our revenues, they've all gone down completely. You look at the cocoa board. Cocoa, we used to do about 1 million metric tons every year. Now we do about 600,000. And there's no strategy in place to make sure that we are able to restore some of the revenue streams. So at the end of the day, when we don't reduce expenditure and then we can't find new revenue sources, we are completely incapacitating the government to do certain things. They can't increase wages, because at this point, government should have increased wages to match up with the rising cost of living. But because they can't do that, an average worker has become so depressed because they can't do anything. They can't pay school fees of their children in elementary schools. Price of elementary school education is also very high. So at the end of the day, we are going to suffer the consequences in the future, because if we can't educate our youth well, we can't take good care of our children, it's going to impact them, impact the next generation. So I think the solution is very basic. Politically, we need to change this government. Once we change the government, there will be an opportunity for us to reset the country, to get our economy back on track. And once that is done, it's going to affect the current hardship of Ghanaians. It's not just the workers, but every Ghanaian, even if you have higher income, you're going through a lot. 6 taxes on petroleum products. That means it's not easy for you to transport yourself to wherever you're going. So at the end of the day, we need that type of intervention. Like I said before, we are actually using the textbook that were actually written in the West for their situation to run our economy here. In the US, they have all kinds of mitigating factors. Programs that help the poor. And if we don't have that, use the same policies, the outcome is going to be negative. Because in the US, you pay, everything is given you free unless you can pay for it. So poor is taken care of. At the end of the day, and you look at petroleum prices, when they go up, the government has reserves enough to pump it into the system to alter the supply. At the end of the day, the prices will stay stable and also help to reduce cost of production. And also they are able to print currency into the system to help the poor, because their currency is very strong. Ours is very weak. And when Bank of Ghana tried to do fiscal easing by quantitative easing by printing currency, it jeopardized our economy. And we should be careful not to go that direction, because it's not going to help mitigate the suffering of the poor.
Yes, just one final question to you then. You seem quite certain and confident that your party is going to win the elections in December. Now, in the event that you win, what would your government do in the short term to bring some respite to the people, to Ghanaians, while you probably work on the long-term situations? What are some of the factors you think can be done?
Right. First strategy NDC is going to use first to get hold of the macroeconomic situation. Reduce expenditure. And once you reduce expenditure, you can have the ability to attend to certain things, even the proposed policies like the LEAP. So the first is reduce the burden of Ghanaians by cutting down expenditure, because we spend a lot. And this government has actually grown the size of our government to understand that the wage bill is very high. So this must come down. And you also look at production, because some of the price gouging or the imports are done by party people. The government is not able to control the situation. So once the government is out of power, the people who are actually causing this structure where we import more than produce locally will be out of power. And at the end of the day, we can produce locally, invest in agriculture, so we can produce enough to alter the supply chain situation. If that is done, it can ease the pain of Ghanaians, because there are a lot of factors that contribute to the current situation that the government can just change. One is expenditure, and the other is streamlining revenue sources. They give huge amounts of money to their cronies through the tax exemptions they've been arranging, they've been given through Parliament. And I think if all these things cease, the government can have control over the economy and begin to invest in economic infrastructure. Because we take the loans are not bad, but when the loans are invested in wrong areas, you take the dams that were built, what are we getting from the dams? We can't produce anything. We can't use the dams to produce anything, but they are still sitting in our books as loans. We also have a situation where the government has lost credibility. So even to restructure some of these debts, it's not been easy, especially the external creditors. They don't trust the government anymore because they said they were not even going to IMF, and they did. So each time MPP tells you anything now, you doubt it, and Ghanaians don't have confidence in them. So I think with the new government, it will give us a clean slate to start. Certain proper policies can be put in place. The macroeconomic environment can also be dealt with. And then we look into the future with hope, because we can now invest in the future. We can now invest in education and other things to turn the country around. Because currently, MPP has run out of ideas as to how to get us out of these problems.
Okay, looking into the future with hope, what would be your final message to our listeners and viewers who have joined us today for MyView Show?
My final, appeal to Ghanaians is to vote the NDC into power. We've seen MPPs all. Up to today, all that they do is attributions and explanations of the problem. But they have not taken concrete measures to restore economic stability and to mitigate the suffering of the poor. The wages of this country remain the same. The poor has not been attended to significantly. Price gouging may be going on, but it is the responsibility of the government to make sure that they control the economy. They reduce the tax burden on businesses so they can produce at cheaper cost in order to feed the markets. Other than that, we will continue to import, and the importation will worsen the situation of Ghanaians because we pay high taxes. And anytime you buy those imports, you are employing people in those countries and making our people unemployed, which is a big menace in our country. So we need to deal with all this. The 24-hour economy is a game changer. And once we can get our companies to produce under that ambience, we can overcome the trade deficit that continues to grow. As a result of that action, we can mitigate the suffering of the poor. So they should vote for NDC when they go to the polls at the end of this year. And once start learning their lessons, and at some point when they come back, they will know that you can deceive Ghanaians to come to power, but when they realize the deception, they'll get you out of power.
Well, on that note, we would like to say a very big thank you to Dr. Justice Salifu, who has so generously joined us today to help us to understand these matters and to try to explain the issues surrounding the rising cost of living in Ghana, and some of the problems that have resulted in that, and some of the issues, some of the things that can be done to ameliorate the situation, or at least to reduce the burden on Ghanaians. And so we say a very big thank you to Dr. Salifu again, who has joined us this evening for MyView Show this evening, or maybe this afternoon, depending on where you are watching us from. And in saying thank you, we also like to say thank you to all our viewers and listeners who joined us today. We'd like to say a very big thank you to our listeners who are joining us in Sakina Information Center in Tatali in Northern Ghana. Also, we would like to say a big thank you to our listeners on High FM 3.7 in the Mind Eastern region. And also a very big thank you to our listeners on the King's Radio in Accra. And we say thank you to all our viewers and listeners who have joined us on other networks, on Jaframa TV or Fans TV, on Adelima Community Center, also on all your favorite social media platforms, on Facebook, on Twitter, on Twitch, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and all other networks that you are joining us from. We say thank you to you. We are grateful for your time. We are grateful that you make time to join us every Monday evening for MyView Show. And until next time, same time next week when we bring you another edition of MyView Show here live on TodayGhanaNews TV, as we say, thank you very much. Stay blessed. Stay safe. God bless you. God bless Ghana. Thank you very much.
The country where I come from, the truth is irony. Just like animal farm, justice mean inequity. So who go say the truth? Who go say the truth? Christian can say silence, Islamic leaders silence, kings and queens silence, traditional leaders